filmmaker to another talk about taking ownership and changing the narratives. Africans, both on the continent and in the diaspora, have begun to take ownerships of their narratives and how their stories are being told to the rest of the world. Sharine Atif, an Egyptian American emerging filmmaker living in Cairo and New York City, is part of that effort, using movies as a platform to tell African story from a new perspective to the world. Her film, JEBEL, BANAT, which also won an award at the festival, captured the beauty of Egypt's countryside to tell an ancient tale from a new perspective that helps shed light on an important gender topic. Tell us about your film, which I just saw. Is an amazing cine- cinematography. So, can you tell us what drew you to the project?
I was doing my master's program at California Institute of the Arts, the school that's founded by Walt Disney, and I chose that project for my thesis film. But I had wanted to shoot that film a while before, like 2 or 3 years before joining my program. When I was living in Cairo, I'm based in Cairo in Egypt now, I would go to St. Catherine Sinai, the desert, just hiking mountains to get away from the crowded city and the congestion and the dusty, polluted air. And I would go with a group of friends and we would hike the mountains. And of course, one of the most popular mountains there is called the Moses Mountain from the Exodus, the story of the Exodus, and very historic, and St. Catherine Mountain. But then we started running out of mountains, so that we started hiking all other mountains, and especially the less popular ones. So there was one called Girls Mountain. So I had asked my nomadic guide, like, why do they call it Girls Mountain? And he told me about this legend that took place in the 1800s where two sisters, they were afraid of marriage and they escaped. And then after that happened, actually they say that it changed the way they would marry off their girls, and they stopped forcing girls after that incident.
Okay. It touched on one of the topic that in Africa, currently in Africa, gender inclusion and forced marriage. So, what is your opinion about that now that you're based in Egypt?
Well, I think of course, there's the very traditional families and rural areas and stuff that still follow the tradition, and they carry out that, where they have, like, there's a whole spectrum of types of different traditional marriages. There's the forced marriage, there's early marriage, there's arranged marriage, and they all come in different shapes and forms. I've heard stories that arranged marriage has worked for some people, and they get married and they fall in love and they have a happy life. But that's kind of like, it's like you hitting the jackpot. It's you and your luck. It's like they say in Egypt, a certain saying is like, when you buy a watermelon, you never know if it's sweet until you open it. It's the same kind of thing. And in some cases, the young marriage is less likely to happen than nowadays, unless if it's really in very rural areas in Upper Egypt, not like in the modern parts of Egypt, like in Cairo, and people that are coming from more upper class or educated. But yeah, sometimes it's not even a matter of education. Even rich people, or people that are very well educated, they do it because they want to keep the family wealth, so they marry from within the family. And most of the time, the women, they don't get to choose or say no or deny the groom or the person that come to marry and propose. So it's just one form of many different forms of oppression happening in Egypt. And I just like what blew my mind is that this happened in the 19th century, in 1816, and for these girls that come from a very, very small tribe, and they've never been out of the area, and to be so brave and make such a move and run away from that inspired me a lot, because like it can be timeless in a way, because like even now the same thing is still happening, and it continues to happen in different parts of the world, not just in Egypt. So I thought that was interesting to me, that a Bedouin area that even some Egyptians themselves in Cairo and the modern cities and the capital, they don't even know of. So yeah.
One of the other things that really strike me is the beauty. Is the landscape, the beauty of the landscape. How did you find? You mentioned earlier that you discovered the area while you were hiking.
Yes.
So, what was the process like to get your actors? What was the production process
Okay.
like for you?
So when I had first had the idea, of course, I felt so intimidated by the idea because it was going to be very extremely difficult for so many reasons. First, it's actually a 6-hour ride from Cairo by car and like an hour or 45-minute ride from airplane. This is way expensive, and then it would go to Sharm el-Sheikh airport, and then from Sharm el-Sheikh you'd still have to ride like a car for 2 hours to get to St. Catherine. St. Catherine is like surrounded by mountains, a desert, and it doesn't have the sea, the Red Sea. Actually, you have to drive 2 to 3 hours out to Nuweiba or the other side of Taba and to get and reach to the sea. So it's in the south of the
Peninsula?
Yeah, peninsula, and it's all surrounded by mountains and hiking. So you literally have to hike. But for me, I kind of did it at first as just as a like sport, as a hobby, just to kind of get out of the city. And then I started becoming addicted to it, and almost like just like even also developing a really strong relationship with the Bedouins, the nomads, and their families. I started like I would actually me and a group of Egyptian friends. We would go and spend the night at their house, like in their small, simple Bedouin house, and just with our sleeping bags and our tents. Like, and they had a special area in the backyard area where you can just put your tent and sleep there.
So did that help your process?
Definitely, because like
In what
before
way?
shooting, I went in the summer of 2015, 2016, the end of the school. I arrived on May, and I still had 1 year left for my school. But I came to Egypt with no money, like $0 for the film, no crew, no cast, no equipment, nothing. I was completely on my own, but then I was starting to like try to find my team. I started getting my team little by little, and the casting was the most difficult of all because I needed to have two girls that looked like sisters. They needed to be okay with adapting the dialect, the Bedouin dialect, because that's actually very different from the dialect that we speak in Cairo, in Egypt. And then they had to agree not to get paid and come stay out and shoot in the desert for like 8 days or 10 days.
Oh, wow.
And not get paid. And also like the challenge of the environment there, it's not for everyone. Like I'm used to that kind of harshness and like hiking and sleeping in the middle of the stars, under the stars, but not everyone is used to that. There's not a traditional normal type of bathroom. You have to kind of just find a spot somewhere behind the mountain and just go. And like one of the crew, one of the team members, they didn't go to the bathroom for 7 days. They just couldn't.
How
And
did they
had
manage
a
that?
lot of meltdowns, a lot of no network for people to call back home. It was very, very difficult and harsh. Like we had to climb a 2,000-meter mountain to get to the top of the mountain, so for the end scene.
Yeah.
And that was like really, like we shot that on the second day, and it was a waste because by the time we got up there carrying all the heavy equipment, the sun already went down, and so it was very miscalculated, and then almost like lost trust in my crew, and I had to kind of like go with the schedule and then do that day on a pickup day at the end. And just little by little, they started building. I started building the trust again, and they were fine, and they were okay, and like I mean, there were lots of good and bad things, but a really, really good lesson to learn. I was able to get Canon to sponsor. If I were gonna rent the equipment, I would have ended up paying like $15,000 just for the equipment. But thank God, like I had a friend who's a very famous actor in Egypt, Khalid Abu Naga, and he's also a producer. He helps Egyptian independent filmmakers who are up and coming that have good projects, and he has like the sponsorship agreement with Canon to like give out the cameras and lenses and stuff, so that really helped a lot. And none of the cast and crew got paid anything, and of course we had to pay to build the sets, and we had to pay for the hair because the hair actually they had short hair.
Oh, okay.
And so that cost like $800 just to get real human hair, because I didn't want it to look like a wig, and I actually had to do the hair too on set because we couldn't afford to get a hairstylist to come and do it, and it was a very specific way to do it because the braided bun in the front at the time meant that the girls were still unmarried, and so that was very important.
So that was symbolic.
Symbolic for like
Okay.
those are the girls who are still unmarried. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And so that was another thing. It spent like an hour to 2 hours a day, sometimes twice a day if there was a night shoot to like redo the hair. So that was one thing. And sometimes we were actually rewriting scripts as we go because we were like adjusting the scenes because we were running out of time, lots of problems coming up, problem solving just on the spot. One of the actresses that was supposed to play the stepmother, kind of like we had to take out all of her scenes because she got scared from the hiking, and she just like left the set and said, "I'm sorry, I can't do it." Yeah, so there was a lot of crazy moments, but yeah, it was.
What did you learn from that experience that you will carry to your next movie?
What I learned is that, well, to never take no for an answer. That sometimes even when people tell you no, that doesn't mean like you can't do it. Like to just keep trying and trying and trying until you really hit the dead end wall, and you know that it's something impossible. But just like don't just give up when people say no, because almost everyone told me you're insane. You're not gonna get the money for it. You're not gonna find actors. You're not gonna get a permit. The permit, that's a whole other story. But yeah, I think that the more you and the most importantly, don't have a plan B, because once you have a plan B, plan A is dead. You kill plan A right away. Another thing I learned, I think the most important thing is the crew. You have to make sure that the crew, each member of the crew really knows what they're doing. But given that it was a student film and I had a very tight deadline and I had no budget, I kind of had to compromise that a bit. But it really affected a lot of the work, because like the most important thing is as assistant director knowing, because they take care of the production schedule, and if you don't have a good production assistant director, you're pretty much screwed. It's like really like chaos. Drawing the scenes. I like to call it, you draw the scenes with your DP. You have to sit together and figure out how you're going to shoot everything before you go and shoot. I didn't have the luxury to do that because he was working on a lot of other productions, and we didn't have the time to do that, so he just came on the production and for the first time looking at the script. So that was really bad. That wasn't good. Use lighting for two reasons. Well, first of all, it would be really difficult to carry it like in the hike, and secondly, we didn't have the budget for it, and also thirdly, it was going to take more time, because if you have lights, that means more setting up. So we used the valuable lighting. Another thing I've learned, better communication, because lots of people and every single person is different. I had no complaints, but I'm just saying every single person has a very different way of dealing with, and like you have to know
As an
actor, or even as a crew, everyone has a very different way of dealing with, and like you need to know that ahead of time, because once you're in production, that's it. There's no like firing and rehiring. That's it. So I think it's important to actually give us, what I've learned after this is to give a sample of the script as a kind of like part of the interviewing and hiring process before you actually shake hands and say, okay, you're on board, to actually give them a sample of the work to make sure that they're on the same page and they know and you're going to get what you expect from them. So that's what I've started doing. Like if I'm going to hire an assistant director, I would give them a scene. I would tell them, can you make a production schedule? We have to shoot in this location only one day, and we have 5 scenes for it. We have this actor only on the end of just to get a sense of like, do they know what they're doing? Are they going to know how to fix and write production schedule? It's very technical. Being an assistant director doesn't mean it's a step beneath becoming a director. It's a very different tasks. A lot of administrative and management and time management and office work has nothing to do creatively at all. So that's very important. Just like sit with your DP, your cameraman, or camerawoman, whoever you're working with, and make sure you understand what the shot language is, and decide your camera movements, decide the angles, decide the shot sizes, decide why, those are very important elements. What is the scene about? All that stuff, like as much as you can prepare before, because there's a lot of things that are going to come up on production that you're not going to be anticipating, that you're going to want less problems. So the more you can get everything that's in your hands done and prepared, the more you're going to have a better and effective shoot on production.
So this is something as you become more experienced in the field, you will understand how to manage better. So during